At my niece's wedding reception in Maui, my daughter walked up to me at the welcome cocktail hour and said, loud enough for 3 other tables to hear, "Mom, we put you at table 14 with the kids and the divorced cousins. The head table is for immediate family only." I nodded. I smiled. I said, "Of course, sweetheart, whatever works." What she didn't know was that the $42,000 she'd been bragging about, the suite at the Four Seasons, the welcome dinner, the rehearsal brunch, the open bar at the reception, every penny of it had come off my American Express 6 weeks earlier. And what she really didn't know was that the next morning, while she was sleeping off the champagne, I was going to drive to the Resort Business Center, sit down at a computer, and call my attorney in Chicago. Good afternoon, dear listeners. It's Hannah here, and I'm glad you found your way back to my little corner of the internet. Before I take you into this one, do me a favor. Hit the like button if you've ever sat at a kid's table in your own family, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from today. I love seeing how far my stories travel. Last week I heard from a grandmother in Glasgow and a retired nurse in Manila, and it warmed my whole afternoon. Now, let me tell you about my daughter Brigitte. For 71 years, I believed family was the foundation under everything. I grew up the oldest of 5 in a small house outside Cleveland, and my mother used to say, "Family is the only thing you don't get to quit." I carried that into my marriage to my late husband, Theodore. We met in 1974 at a community theater production of Our Town. He was painting flats, I was selling tickets, and we were married 14 months later. He spent 36 years as a pharmacist, took over his father's drugstore in Oak Park, and I taught 2nd grade in the same Chicago public schools building for 31 years. We weren't rich. We were what my mother would have called careful. We packed lunches. We drove Toyotas until they wouldn't go anymore. We never took a real vacation until our 25th anniversary, when Theodore surprised me with a week in Charleston. When Theodore died of pancreatic cancer 4 years ago, the diagnosis to the funeral took 11 weeks. 11 weeks. I'm still angry about it sometimes, in the way you can be angry at a thunderstorm. He left behind a paid-off bungalow, a 401k, we both fed every paycheck for 4 decades, and a life insurance policy that, frankly, surprised both of us when the paperwork came through. All told, I was a widow with somewhere around $900,000 in assets and a mortgage-free house, comfortable by anyone's measure. Set for life, if I was careful. And I am always careful. I have one child, Bridget. She's 44 now, lives in a Tudor-style colonial in Glencoe that's a wealthy suburb north of Chicago, the kind with private beaches on Lake Michigan and a high school that sends kids to Stanford. Her husband, Garrison, is a partner at a commercial real estate firm in the Loop. He drives a leased Range Rover. She drives a leased Audi. Their household income, near as I can tell from the bragging at Christmas dinners, is somewhere north of $340,000 a year. They have 2 kids, my grandson Maxwell, who's 11 and obsessed with travel baseball, and my granddaughter Wren, who's 8 and just lost her 2 front teeth this past November. I love those children with a force I cannot describe. The trouble started, as I look back on it now, about 2 years after Theodore died. It began the way these things always begin, small, reasonable, framed as temporary. Brigitte called me one Sunday afternoon, and I could tell from her voice before she even said hello that she'd been crying. "Mom, I don't know what to do. Garrison's bonus structure changed at the firm, and we're short for Maxwell's travel team registration. It's $3,000 for the season. He's going to be devastated if he can't play. I'll pay you back the second Garrison's quarterly hits." I wrote the check that afternoon. Of course I did. I drove it over myself so I could see Maxwell's face when she told him. He hugged me around the middle and said, "Thanks, Grandma." And I thought, this is exactly what Theodore and I saved for. This is the dream. She never paid it back. But she never had to, because 11 weeks later, she called about Wren's gymnastics tuition, which was somehow $4,200 a year, and could I please just front it because Garrison's commission check was tied up in escrow on a deal in Schaumburg. I said yes. Then it was the down payment on Bridget's new Audi lease. Only $5,500. Mom, you're saving me from a real bind. Then a vet bill for their golden doodle, Cooper, that came to $1,900. Then, a family emergency that turned out to be a tax bill they hadn't planned for. $12,000 that time. I'm not going to walk you through every transfer. There were 23 of them between January of last year and October of this one. Together, they came to $246,318.41. I know the exact number because eventually I sat down and added it up, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The wedding was for my late sister's daughter, my niece Tabitha. Tabitha is the closest thing I have to a second daughter. When my sister passed in 2018, Tabitha and I started having lunch every other Thursday at a diner on Roosevelt Road, and she calls me Auntie H. She got engaged last spring to a lovely young man named Cole who works in pediatric oncology. They picked a small ceremony in Maui in late January, just 32 guests at a beachfront resort. When Tabitha called me with the news, I cried. I told her I wanted to help. I told her I wanted to give them the wedding her mother would have given them, and I meant it. I committed to covering the resort accommodations for the immediate family, 3 suites for 4 nights, plus the welcome dinner, the rehearsal brunch, and the open bar at the reception itself. $42,160 charged to my Amex in early December. Here's what I didn't anticipate. Bridget had overheard me on the phone with Tabitha making the arrangements. She called me the next morning, breezy and entitled. "Mom, since you're already covering the suites, you should just put us in one too. The kids will want to swim with their cousins. And honestly, with Garrison's year-end, we just can't swing Hawaii right now." The suites were $2,800 a night. 4 nights, 4 people, a separate suite. That was another $11,000 on top of what I'd already committed. But I said yes. Of course I said yes. I'd said yes for 2 years. By then, saying yes was just what I did. Bridget posted about the trip on Facebook the day we landed. A photo of the 4 of them on the lanai of their suite, Mai Tais in hand, ocean behind them, captioned, "Treating the family to a Hawaiian getaway." Sometimes you just have to invest in memories. 317 likes. Her old college roommate commented, "Goals." Her sister-in-law commented, "So generous, you two." I saw it on my phone in the cab from the airport. I didn't say anything. I never say anything. That was my whole life. Keeping the peace, smoothing things over, telling myself it didn't matter what people thought as long as my family was happy. The welcome cocktail hour was the second night, set up in a covered courtyard with tiki torches and a steel drum band. I'd worn a navy dress I'd bought specifically for the trip, and I'd had my hair done at the resort salon that afternoon. I felt pretty. I felt, for the first time since Theodore died, like I was somewhere beautiful with people I loved. Bridget and Garrison were already there when I arrived, working the room. Garrison was talking to Cole's father about commercial real estate in Honolulu. Bridget was laughing too loudly at something Tabitha's mother-in-law said. I waved, walked over, and that's when Bridget pulled me aside. "Mom, so we put you at table 14 with the kids and the divorced cousins. The head table is for immediate family only. I want to tell you what that moment was like. It was like a small, cold hand reaching up under my ribs. The steel drum band was playing tiny bubbles. A waiter walked past with a tray of Mai Tais. I could smell plumeria. And my daughter, my only child, the baby I'd labored 31 hours to deliver, the little girl I'd taught to read with phonics flashcards on our kitchen floor, was telling me I wasn't immediate family at the wedding I was paying for. I nodded. I smiled. I said something gracious and walked to table 14. At my table were Tabitha's 2 cousins from her father's side, a twice-divorced man in his 50s named Reggie, who couldn't stop checking his phone, and his sister Margin, who was sweet but spent the whole night talking about her Yorkie. There were also 4 children under 12, including my own grandchildren, who were thrilled about it because they got to eat chicken fingers and drink Shirley Temples. Maxwell waved at me from his end of the table. Ren came over and sat in my lap for 15 minutes before her mother called her away. I watched the head table from 40 feet away. Bridget and Garrison were seated with Tabitha and Cole, the parents of the groom, and Cole's brother who'd flown in from Denver. Bridget laughed and laughed and laughed. At one point, she stood up and made a toast. "To family," she said, "to the bonds that hold us together, to the people who show up no matter what." She raised her glass. So did the head table. 40 feet away. I raised mine too. That night, back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time without turning on the light. I thought about Theodore. I thought about what he would have said if he'd been there. He wouldn't have made a scene. He would have done exactly what I did at the courtyard. Nodded, smiled, walked away. But he would have come back to the room and said, very quietly, "Hannah, we are done." I opened my laptop. I logged into my Amex account. I scrolled back through the charges. I logged into my Amex account. I scrolled back through the charges. I opened a new email to my attorney in Chicago, a woman named Annika Stroberg who'd handled Theodore's estate and whose mother had been in my book club back in the 90s. I typed the subject line, "Need to talk Monday morning, urgent." Then I deleted it. I rewrote it. Need a full estate restructuring, asset protection, will revision, available anytime after Monday at 9 a.m. I sent it at 11:47 p.m. Hawaii time. By the time I got back to Chicago Tuesday afternoon, Annika had cleared her Wednesday morning calendar. Her office is on the 18th floor of a building on LaSalle Street, and her windows look out over the Chicago River. She poured me coffee in a real china cup, sat down across from me and said, "Hannah, tell me everything." So I did. I told her about Theodore, about the bungalow and the 401k and the life insurance, about the 2 years of transfers, about the wedding, about table 14, about the toast. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she opened a notebook and said, "All right, here's what we're going to do." By Friday afternoon, we had a plan, a revocable living trust, with me as sole trustee and Annika's firm as successor. Everything went into it. The bungalow, the brokerage accounts, the IRA, the life insurance proceeds I'd already rolled over, my checking and savings. The trust was structured so that Bridget could not, under any circumstances, access principal during my lifetime. We rewrote my will entirely. Bridget had been the primary beneficiary, due to inherit the bulk of the estate at my passing. Under the new will, she received exactly $15,000, a token, Annika explained, just enough to make a contest difficult. The rest was structured into 2 educational trusts for Maxwell and Wren, with strict provisions. Funds for tuition only, paid directly to accredited institutions. No cash distributions until age 30. A successor trustee, my niece Tabitha, who would administer in case I was incapacitated. The remainder, after the kids' trusts were funded, went to 2 charities, a literacy organization in Chicago public schools and the Pancreatic Cancer Research Foundation I'd been donating to since Theodore died. I also did something Annika strongly suggested. I closed every joint financial instrument I'd ever shared with Bridget. There was a checking account I'd opened back in 2002 so she could deposit her summer waitressing tips. I'd never closed it, and her name was still on it. There was a small CD I'd added her to as a beneficiary. There was a credit card with her as an authorized user from when she was in college. Gone, gone, gone. I also called my Amex and froze the card I'd been using for family expenses. Then I opened a new one in my name only, with a different account number. The last thing I did, on Annika's instructions, was sit down for a full cognitive evaluation with a neurologist named Dr. Amani Okonkwo at Northwestern. 65 years old to 110, she tested everything: memory, executive function, processing speed, judgment. She wrote a 4-page letter on her clinical letterhead stating that Hannah was, in her professional opinion, fully cognitively intact and capable of managing her own affairs. Annika put it in the file. "If she ever comes at you with a competency claim," Annika said, "this is the wall she runs into." I asked Annika if that was really likely. She looked at me for a long moment. "Hannah," she said, "I've been doing this for 22 years. When the money tap turns off, you'd be amazed how fast a loving daughter becomes a concerned daughter." The first call from Bridget came on a Saturday, 11 days after I'd left Maui. I was at my kitchen table eating an English muffin with marmalade, and the caller ID said, "Bridget Sell." "Mom, what's going on with the joint checking?" "I closed it," I said. Why?" "Without telling me." "Mom, that's been our account for 20 years. "It hasn't been our account for 20 years. It hasn't been our account." "It was your account from college. I just never took my name off." Well, what about Mom? I tried to put a payment through on the Audi and the card didn't go through. Did something happen with your card? I changed the account number, I said. I'll be paying for my own things from now on. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing. Mom, did something happen? Are you upset about something? And here it was, the opening I'd been waiting for. The chance to say it. I almost did. I almost said, you sat me at table 14 at a wedding I paid for, but Annika had told me, very specifically, don't engage. Don't justify. Don't explain. Just state the new reality. I've made some changes to my finances. Nothing for you to worry about. I'm doing fine. Mom, I don't understand. Did Aunt Sylvie say something to you? Has somebody been in your ear? No one has been in my ear, Brigitte. Mom, you sound off. Are you sleeping? Are you eating? When was the last time you saw Dr. Rindell? There it was, 11 days. It took her 11 days to start floating the idea that something was wrong with me. I'm fine, sweetheart. I have to go. I have a book club call in 10 minutes. I hung up. She called back 6 times that afternoon. I let them go to voicemail. The voicemails went in order from confused to wounded to demanding to sharp to icy. The last one said, I am going to drive down there tomorrow and we are going to talk about this and you are going to explain to me what you think you're doing. She didn't drive down, but Garrison did, 4 days later on a Wednesday morning. He pulled into my driveway in the Range Rover at 10:15. I watched him from the front window. He stood on the porch for a long moment before he rang the bell, like he was rehearsing. I opened the door and let him into the foyer. I didn't offer him a seat. Hannah, he said. He'd always called me Hannah. Never Mom, never even Mrs. Whitmore, just Hannah. From day one, I thought it was sophisticated when Bridget first brought him home. I see it differently now. Garrison, to what do I owe this visit? Bridget's worried. We're worried. The financial stuff. The calls she's been making to your bank, the changes to your accounts. It's not like you, Hannah. We're concerned. I'm not. Have you been seeing anyone? Talking to anyone outside the family? Sometimes there are scammers who target widows, or even, friends or your church people who get ideas in your head. Garrison, why are you in my house? He pulled a folder out of the leather messenger bag he was carrying. He set it on my hallway table. We had a conversation with our attorney, just to understand the options. If a parent shows signs of cognitive decline or makes sudden decisions out of character, the family has standing to request an emergency evaluation to make sure the parent is being properly cared for. I looked at the folder. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. Garrison, I said, I want you to listen to me very carefully. You are going to take that folder. You are going to walk out of my house, and you are going to call your wife on the drive home and tell her that her mother is not, in fact, losing her mind, and that any attempt to file what you're describing will be met with consequences you have not begun to imagine. Do you understand me? His face changed. It went still. Calculating. The salesman face, the closer face, the face he wore at his real estate closings. Hannah, I think you're upset. And I think we should let things cool off. I think you should leave my house. He left. He left the folder on the hallway table. I picked it up with the tips of my fingers like it was a dead mouse, and I dropped it into the recycling bin in the garage. Then I called Annika. She took my call in the middle of a deposition. Hannah, are you safe? I'm fine. He didn't threaten me physically, but he came with a folder. They've already talked to a lawyer. All right, listen to me. Do not stay there alone. Is there anyone, your sister-in-law, a friend, anyone you can stay with for a week? I called my college roommate Marisol Fontaine. We've been friends for 52 years. She lives in a townhouse in Lincoln Park with her partner Dolores, and she said, Hannah, you get in the car and you come right now. Do you hear me? I packed an overnight bag in 20 minutes. I drove to Lincoln Park. I stayed for 9 days. While I was at Marisol's, I turned my phone off most of the time. When I checked it, the missed calls and voicemails had escalated to a level I would not have believed Brigitte capable of. There were 31 voicemails over those 9 days. The first few were the same tone as before, concerned, wounded, pleading. Then they started to shift. She accused me of being manipulated by Marisol. She accused Tabitha of poisoning me at the wedding. She accused me of being a cold, withholding mother who had always picked work over family. She accused me of actually stealing money she said was rightfully hers from a Hawaii trust her grandfather had supposedly set up. There was no such trust. I'd been at the reading of my own father's will in 1997. There was nothing for Bridget in it. And then the last voicemail, the day before I went home, said this: "Mom, I want you to know that if you don't reverse the changes by the end of the month, Garrison's attorney is filing for a conservatorship. We do not want to do this. We are doing this because we love you. We are doing this because we are afraid for you." I played that one for Marisol on her kitchen island. She listened to the whole thing. Then she said, "Hannah, they are absolutely going to lose, but you have to be ready." I came home the following Monday. Tuesday morning, I got a certified letter from a downtown firm called Brennan, Halsey & Cho, formally notifying me that a petition had been filed in the Cook County Circuit Court for emergency guardianship and conservatorship of my person and estate, citing concerns about cognitive decline, susceptibility to undue influence, and a pattern of erratic financial decisions over the past 60 days. I sat at my kitchen table with that letter and I cried. I'm going to tell you the truth. I cried for an hour, not because I was afraid I'd lose. Annika had told me from the beginning that we would win, and I believed her. I cried because my daughter had filed a lawsuit accusing me of being insane. Then I dried my face. I called Annika. I drove downtown that afternoon and we started preparing. The hearing was set for a Tuesday in mid-April in the Daly Center, courtroom 1908. Annika and her associate, a young woman named Petra, sat with me at the respondents' table. Marisol came as moral support and sat in the gallery directly behind us. Tabitha came too. Tabitha, who had heard the whole story over a long lunch in March and had cried with her face in her hands and said, "Auntie H, my mother would be heartbroken." She sat next to Marisol in a navy suit. Across the aisle, Bridget and Garrison sat with their attorney, a man named Wesley Brennan, mid-50s, expensive suit, the kind of confidence that comes from never having truly lost. Bridget wore a charcoal dress and her hair pulled back. She looked tired. She looked, frankly, like she'd been crying for days. She did not look at me once. Judge Yolanda Pereira took the bench at 9:15. She was in her mid-60s, with reading glasses on a beaded chain and a Chicago accent you could cut with a knife. Wesley Brennan opened. He told the court a story of a devoted daughter watching her widowed mother decline. He talked about my sudden and dramatic financial changes. He talked about my isolation from family. He talked about a stay with a friend that he characterized as evidence of confusion and distress. He produced no medical records because he had none. He produced Bridget's testimony, which was a performance I will not forget if I live to be 100. Bridget wept on the stand. She said she had lost her mother. She said she didn't know what had come over me. She said she suspected Marisol of elder financial abuse. She said the family trip to Hawaii had been beautiful but exhausting, and she was worried I'd come back different. She said she had been the one paying for our family events for years, and she just wanted her mother back. I sat there listening to her say I had paid for the things I had paid for, in the opposite direction, under oath. Then Annika stood up for cross-examination. "Mrs. Whitaker, you testified that you, quote, paid for the family events for years. Can you tell the court the source of payment for the suite you and your husband and children occupied at the Four Seasons Maui in January of this year?" Bridget blinked. Garrison and I covered our portion of the trip. Were you aware that the resort accommodations for your party were charged in full to your mother's American Express card on December 6th of last year in the amount of $42,160? I thought my mom that was a gift she wanted to give us. A gift? I see. Mrs. Whitaker, I'm going to show you what's been marked. Respondents Exhibit C. This is a text message from your phone to your mother's phone, dated November 24th. Would you read it for the court? Bridget took the paper. Her hand was shaking. Mom, we can't swing Hawaii. With G's year-end, can you just put us on your card for the suite? It'll pay you back when commission hits in February. Did you pay her back when the commission hit in February? A long silence. Mrs. Whitaker? No. Have you paid back any of the $246,000 your mother has transferred to you over the past 24 months? That wasn't loans. That was, she wanted to help. She wanted to be part of the kids' lives. Mrs. Whitaker, I have here 23 separate text messages and emails from you to your mother, each one containing some version of the phrase, quote, "I'll pay you back." I can read them all into the record if you like. Would you like me to? No. How much have you repaid? Nothing. Barely a whisper. I'm sorry, the court reporter needs to hear you. Nothing. Annika walked back to our table. She picked up another document. Mrs. Whitaker, at your cousin Tabitha's wedding reception in Maui on January 23rd, where were you seated? At the head table. And where was your mother seated? A pause. I, at table 14. Why was she at table 14? There was limited space at the head table. It was for immediate family. Was she immediate family? Bridget didn't answer. Mrs. Whitaker, the mother of the bride's mother, your aunt's sister. Was she immediate family? Yes. And you placed her at table 14 with the children and the bride's divorced cousins. It wasn't meant the way. No further questions, Your Honor. The judge was making notes. Her face was unreadable. Then Annika called Garrison. He was smoother than Bridget, but Annika had ammunition for him too. His firm's compensation data, subpoenaed and entered into evidence. Their household tax returns. The lease payments on the Range Rover and the Audi. The monthly statements on their joint Chase card showing $4,200 a month in restaurants, $2,000 a month at Nordstrom and Saks, $800 a month at the Country Club in Northbrook. Mr. Whitaker, your household gross income for last year was $347,000. Your household discretionary spending, meaning restaurants, retail, and country club dues, not housing or transportation or schools, was approximately $84,000. Why did you and your wife need $11,000 from her mother for plane tickets and a hotel suite for a family wedding? He started to talk about cash flow and the timing of his commissions and the way bonus structures, yes or no, Mr. Whitaker. Did you and your wife have the financial capacity to pay for your own family's accommodations at your cousin's wedding? It would have been difficult, yes or no. A long pause. Yes. Then Annika asked him about the conservatorship. Mr. Whitaker, on the morning of February 22nd, did you drive to Hannah Whitmore's home in Oak Park and present her with a folder containing draft conservatorship paperwork? I went to check on her. Did you bring a folder? Yes. Did the folder contain draft paperwork? It contained information. Did you tell her, and I quote, that any sudden financial decisions could be grounds for an emergency cognitive evaluation? Garrison's jaw tightened. I was trying to express our concern. Mr. Whitaker, did you threaten your mother-in-law with a conservatorship proceeding unless she restored your wife's access to her finances? No. Annika produced the folder. The folder I had dropped in the recycling. Tabitha had retrieved it for me, on Annika's instructions, a week after Garrison's visit. Annika held it up. This was found in Mrs. Whitmore's recycling bin. It contains a draft petition for emergency guardianship, dated 3 days before your visit. Was this folder in your possession on February 22nd? He stared at it. Yes, no further questions. When my own attorney called me to the stand, I told my story plainly. The drugstore, the teaching career, the bungalow, the way Theodore had said, when we drew up our first will in our 30s, we're going to leave it all to her and trust her to do right by it. I told them about table 14. I told them about how, when I'd offered to take Maxwell out for ice cream on the last day in Maui, Brigitte had said, "Actually, Mom, he's got plans with the cousins, maybe next time." And I had walked the beach by myself for 40 minutes. I held it together through all of it. I didn't cry. Judge Pereira denied the petition from the bench. She did not retire to chambers. She did not deliberate. She looked over the top of her reading glasses at Bridget and Garrison, and she said, "I have presided over Cook County's elder law docket for 11 years. I have rarely seen a more transparent attempt to weaponize a guardianship statute against a competent, capable, and frankly admirable woman in pursuit of nothing more than continued access to her assets. The petition is denied. Mrs. Ten, Whitmore, I apologize on behalf of this court for what you've been put through. Mrs. Whitaker, Mr. Whitaker, I would suggest you spend the drive home thinking about what you have done. I have replayed that moment so many times. We didn't speak to Bridget and Garrison in the hallway outside the courtroom. Tabitha put her arm through mine on one side and Marisol on the other, and we walked to the elevators and down to LaSalle and across the street to a steakhouse where Annika had made a lunch reservation. I ordered a martini at noon for the first time in my life. The fallout came in waves over the following months. The court records were public, and a reporter from a Chicago legal news site picked up the case as part of a series on elder financial abuse. The article ran in March. It used the family name. Garrison's firm, which had a strict reputational clause in its partnership agreement, placed him on administrative leave within a week. By June, he had quietly resigned and taken a position at a smaller commercial brokerage downstate. His pay was cut in half. Their country club membership in Northbrook was not renewed. Bridget's friends, the ones I'd watched her cultivate for 15 years, the ones whose Christmas cards I'd received with photos of beach houses in Michigan and ski cabins in Wisconsin, went silent. In August, I learned through Tabitha that they had sold the house in Glencoe. They moved to a smaller place in Mount Prospect. Maxwell was pulled from his travel baseball team. Wren left her private school for the local public elementary. I did not gloat. I want to tell you that very honestly. I felt no triumph at any of it. What I felt was tired. I felt the particular kind of tired that comes from carrying something heavy for a very long time and then setting it down. In late September, I got a letter. Bridget's handwriting on a plain white envelope. 3 pages. I won't redo the whole thing, but it said, in summary, that she knew now what she'd done, that she had spent months in therapy and was beginning to understand the patterns she'd grown up in and replicated, that her own grandmother, my mother, had been the kind of woman who gave and never demanded respect, and she had absorbed the lesson that mothers were resources, that she was sorry, that she did not expect forgiveness, that Maxwell asked about me every Sunday, that Wren had cried at her birthday party in July because I wasn't there. I read that letter 3 times. I put it in the drawer of the roll-top desk Theodore had refinished for me on our 40th anniversary. I did not respond. In October, I did something I had been promising myself for 30 years. I called a travel agent and I booked a Mediterranean cruise, 12 nights, Rome to Venice, with stops in Croatia and Greece. I went by myself. I sat at a small table near the window every night at dinner, and I made friends with a retired English teacher from Tulsa who was traveling alone too. We are still in touch. She's coming to visit me at Easter. When I came back, the maple in my front yard had turned. I sat on the porch one Sunday afternoon in a wool sweater Theodore had bought me in 1998, and I drank a cup of tea, and I thought, I am all right. I am better than all right. I am free. The granddaughter showed up in November. Wren, 8 years old. She came on a Saturday afternoon with her father. Garrison stood at the end of the walk and would not come closer. He had aged 5 years. He looked at me and he nodded once, and he stayed by the car. Wren walked up the path by herself in a pink puffer coat. She had a drawing in her hand. Grandma, I made you something. It was a picture of the 2 of us at the beach in Maui. She had drawn us both in swimsuits. She had drawn a sun with a smiling face. She had written, in careful 8-year-old printing, I love you, Grandma. I'm sorry. I knelt down on my porch in my wool sweater and I held my granddaughter and I cried into her hair. I let her in. I made her hot chocolate. We sat at my kitchen table for an hour and a half, and she told me about her new school and her new best friend, and how her mother cried sometimes at night, and her dad worked all the time now. When it was time for her to go, I walked her down to the car. Garrison and I looked at each other across the hood of his car, a Hyundai now, not a Range Rover, and he said, Hannah. I said, Garrison. That was all. I have not invited them back yet. I may at Christmas. I may not. Wren can come on her own terms when she's older and can drive herself. The Educational Trust will pay for her college and her graduate school and anything she wants to learn. Maxwell's too. They will know when the trusts mature that their grandmother loved them enough to plan for them. They will know that I did not abandon them, They will know that I drew a line because the line needed to be drawn. So what did all this cost me? It cost me a daughter in the form I had imagined her. It cost me the fantasy of a big family Christmas with everyone gathered at the bungalow. It cost me $112,000 in legal fees and travel and the wedding and the cruise and the cognitive evaluation, which I think of now as the single best money I have ever spent. What did it buy me? It bought me my dignity. It bought me a quiet house that belongs to me. It bought me a friendship with my niece that is the closest thing I have to a child now. It bought me an English teacher friend in Tulsa and a watercolor class at the senior center on Wednesdays and a martini at noon when I want one. It bought me the right to sit at any table I damn well please. So I'm going to ask you the same thing I asked myself in that hotel room in Maui at midnight with the laptop open and the ocean somewhere outside the window. If your child made you feel small at the table you paid for, what would you do? Would you keep paying to keep the peace? Or would you finally close the tab? I close mine. And every morning when I wake up in my own house and pour my own coffee and read my own paper, I'm grateful I did. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Hit that like button if Hannah's story moved you, and tell me down in the comments where you're listening from. I'll see you next Sunday. I've thought about that night in Maui more times than I can count. The steel drums playing tiny bubbles, the smell of plumeria, the small cold hand under my ribs when Bridget said the words, immediate family only. And what I keep coming back to is this. Nothing that happened to me that night happened by accident. Every step of it had been built, brick, by my own hands over 2 decades. Bridget didn't become the woman who put her mother at table 14 in a single moment. She became her over 23 transfers and 100,000 quiet yeses from a mother who was too afraid of losing her to ever say no. That's the part I want you to hear if you take nothing else from my story. The cause is rarely the moment. The cause is the pattern. And patterns only ever change when one person inside them decides they've had enough. I had to learn, late in life, that there is a difference between being kind and being useful. Real kindness keeps its self-respect. Real kindness can say no and still love you on the way out the door. What I had been doing for 20 years wasn't kindness. It was a kind of cowardice, dressed up in maternal clothing. I was afraid that if I stopped paying, Bridget would stop calling. And so I paid and paid and paid, and what I bought with all that money was a daughter who didn't think I deserved a seat at her cousin's wedding. If I could go back to the woman I was at the welcome cocktail hour, the one who nodded and smiled and walked to table 14, I would tell her this. Character is something you build in the quiet hours, in the boring middle of an ordinary Wednesday, long before the moment when you'll need it. I built mine sitting on a hotel bed with a laptop open at midnight. I built mine in Annika's office with a yellow legal pad. I built mine in Marisol's guest room with my phone turned off for 9 days. None of it was dramatic. All of it was decisive. And courage. Courage is not the absence of trembling. My hands shook for weeks. I cried in the hallway of the Daily Center. I cried on the hallway of the Daily Center. I cried on the phone with my niece. Courage is just the willingness to keep walking forward while your hands shake. You don't have to feel brave. You only have to do the next correct thing. The mind has to be sharper than the heart sometimes. My heart wanted to forgive Bridget the morning after the wedding and write another check. My mind finally said no. The mind notices the pattern. The heart only feels the moment. A wise woman lets the mind bleed when the stakes are high and the heart is being manipulated. I am 71 years old, and I am sitting on my front porch in a wool sweater my husband bought me in 1998, and I am free. My granddaughter Ren drew me a picture this November, and I cried into her hair. That's the life I chose when I closed the joint account. That's the life I would have missed if I had kept paying for a seat at a table that was never really mine. Draw your line. Keep your dignity. And remember that the most loving thing you can do for a daughter who treats you like an ATM is at long last to stop being one.